Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be able to join you today. I was a little concerned in getting prepared for this day. I actually made the mistake of going online and looking at some of the TEDx sessions in other communities around the country and realized, oh my gosh, I don't have any theatrics available. So what I'm going to share with you during these precious few moments is a little bit about my experience in working in communities, both in northern New Mexico and Albuquerque and around the state. And I'll give you some examples from economic development, as well as education, and let's see, regional transit. That's going to be really pretty interesting. Building public-private partnerships isn't just limited to the education space, clearly. It really covers a number of domains. But at the end of the day, public-private partnerships really are about community engagement, sort of a different level of how to bring other voices to the table to have the conversation. Let me start by saying that public-private partnerships are not new. But with globalization and sort of the impact of the internet and the information age, the world has become a very, very small place. I like to call New Mexico small town New Mexico, because you can know anything about anybody within 3 or 4 degrees within a conversation, one click on Facebook or in Google, and you know a lot about your neighbor, for example. We're in a time and a place where social, economic, political, and cultural challenges of the day bring diverse voices together, and it really has caused a pendulum shift in what we perceive as government's role in making change and the private sector's role in paying for that change. So it's really an interesting time right now. It is not uncommon to read about public-private collaborations in education, economic development, healthcare, or, for example, in the last couple of days, you may have read about Governor Richardson's efforts to bring together business leaders to talk about tax reform and get that business perspective combined with the government perspective to make some change. These partnerships are touted as solutions for social issues of almost every type, from increasing investments in early childhood, which is something I'm involved in currently, to creating regional transit districts, which is something that I've participated in a few years ago, to bridging the digital divide. Buzzwords like public-private are being almost indiscriminately used to describe a whole range of activities. Partnerships have taken on a whole new meaning. There's a widespread trend to broaden participation in governance by strengthening the interface between state and non-state actors. And we are in the midst of what I call a public-private sector movement. It is a situation where the whole of participation can be greater than the sum of the parts. For the record, true public-private partnerships are voluntary collaborations. They build on the respective strengths of each partner at the table. And they're very similar to collaborative leadership models that you may have read about, where people and organizations agree to come together and share ideas and thoughts for making change. The best ones are very, very inclusive, and they ensure that those that they represent, the people at the table, really are part of that overall change process. It's almost a notion of power shifts, where there's more power shared, and the more that is shared, the greater power there is for all of us to make a collective influence. Public-private partnerships are important to the business community today as well because of these pendulum shifts I was talking to you about. In the business community, we know that they're not philanthropic institutions. We know that businesses are in the business of making profit. In addition, companies don't expect to have to do the work of government in terms of providing goods and services, but they are an increasingly powerful actor on the stage of brokering public-private partnerships. And our expectations of them, of the business community, of the private sector, really has changed over time. A certain amount of corporate giving in a community is what we all expect. It is not uncommon to see an Intel or an HP or a Walmart giving to its local community. That is their corporate giving philosophy. But more recently, notions of corporate citizenship and corporate social responsibility have really changed the equation. We now expect companies to become more active participants in the issues of the community, the challenges within a community, that they need to lend their voice and their expertise and sometimes their resources to the conversation, and businesses are knowing that, and they know that. The companies are now moving to meet these new expectations by becoming part of public-private partnerships, of collaborations with a variety of organizations that include nonprofits, other companies, local, state, and national governments. They go beyond concerns and they can extend in all policy areas. The advantages of the private sector, access to finance, knowledge of technologies, entrepreneurial spirit, really can combine with the social responsibility, network of contacts, local knowledge and job creation interests of the public sector. You know, this space it's my favorite space. I sort of dig on this stuff. I really enjoy the opportunity to bring different kinds of people together to make a collective change in a community, to sort of come to the table and see their light bulbs go off, that they're sitting across from someone that they would normally disagree with in any other setting, and yet being part of this opportunity where they see that they have some agreements, where they can actually make change together. It's sort of bringing together that human energy to really drive change. I believe that public-private partnerships are important because they allow all parties to reach and achieve better results than if they operated alone. It's through these partnerships that we can create synergies and extend legitimacy through the leverage of resources, time, talent, professional resources, and social networks. In my world, it's about creating societal change. Sometimes a lack of awareness and political will are the greatest barriers to this social change, and consequently, advocacy partnerships are designed to highlight and promote key issues and represent an area of unexploited potential for public-private collaboration. I would even argue that participation reinforces democracy by making government more accountable and more transparent and more responsive to our needs. There are a number of situations in which partnership between public and private sector institutions is very efficient, and it's an effective mechanism of getting things done. And at the end of the day, to create truly sustainable change, stickiness, if you will, we need a much bigger table with more seats around the table to represent all of the voices that are very often lacking when big decisions are made. A few years back, I had a really beautiful opportunity, a really rich opportunity to participate in the creation of a regional transit district in northern New Mexico. And what was unique about that is that we had economic development interests at the table along with business interests, but more importantly, 5 pueblos, 3 county governments, and 2 municipalities. So it was a very large table. And our challenge was to sort of create this district. And it was interesting because this effort had been tried and failed 4 times before. And we went through an experience where we actually made this a reality in 18 months. And it was the first regional transit district in the state. And I'll talk a little bit more about the details associated with getting to that point, but it was really a wonderful opportunity to see one of the pueblos be the very first to take formal action to creating the transit district. And it was just to see their celebration and sort of driving this and making this a reality and sort of taking the lead role really made a big difference, I think, in getting all of the other communities on board. Successful public-private partnerships are like successful community engagement strategies. Nearly all efforts need to begin with or quickly get to a point of what I call collective readiness. It's a place where you've already assessed the environment for collaboration. And it means getting people to the table and creating a mutual sense of urgency or understanding for what the challenge is before you. In the case of the Regional Transit District, it was sort of a perfect storm where the communities had great concern about the traffic on the highways heading up to Los Alamos, where there were a number of DWI and accidents and other issues. It was a potential opportunity for additional financing to come into the region. And frankly, there was this national interest about creating multimodal communities. So it was the right time. There was this collective readiness to sort of do something about this. The biggest challenges, frankly, were trying to find places where these various communities, public and private, could find an opportunity to agree to work together. Another facet of community engagement, and in this case public-private, is that you need to develop a trust for the participants and what I call being authentically intentional about your relationships with people in the community. It's about really developing true trust and sort of walking that talk. And you create and make a very honest investment in the communication process. It's about peeling away the layers towards understanding. What I found in the education space, some of the biggest challenges in getting the business leaders and education folks to agree is there's disagreements around language. We use different acronyms. We use different words to describe outcomes. We use different words to describe performance-based. We use different words to describe accountability, and it causes a lot of healthy tension and sometimes unhealthy tension as we try to resolve issues. There's also a difference in the business community and in the public sector for timelines and pace. The business community very often is expecting sort of outcomes to come out in a short time frame, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. In the education space, the timelines are much longer. You know, when you're talking about graduation rates, you're talking about multi-year commitment. And so there are a number of challenges in the education conversation around all of those issues, language, as well as timelines and pace. In the regional transit situation, there were those issues as well, but there were also cultural barriers. There were definitely differences in thinking about pace, and there was a lot of historical baggage. So we had a lot of challenges that we had to deal with. I think what made it a very rich experience is that the Pueblo communities chose to get engaged, but for me to be able to go to those tribal communities and to their tribal councils meant that the representatives at the table had to sort of lend their credibility back to me so that I could go to a tribal council, and they had trust in me to go to their tribal council and respect them and have that conversation about why regional transit was important to them. This whole area of community engagement also means sharing power and influence. It means not having your ego so invested that you care about who gets credit for the outcome. It means that you have to really plan the details and really manage expectations about how long things will take to get done, and being honest about the politics of the processes and the personalities. It means being flexible. In public-private partnerships and in community engagement, your real opportunity is about identifying champions, and you'll hear this a lot. You need the business champions to play a lead role in a number of societal areas in terms of making change. This often leads to fresh perspectives and a new voice on key issues, and their involvement can be very critical, especially in the front end of trying to make change or get a partnership off the ground. I use the example of the Early Childhood Development Partnership. This is an effort that has been Kellogg funded back in April, but really our launch point was 2 weeks ago. We had a convening of about 200 business leaders and government leaders from around the state, 85% of which were business leaders. And the whole purpose of this effort was sort of to bring them to the table, to hear their voice, and to begin to create an understanding for the importance of early childhood education and investment in our state. But more importantly, to use that as an opportunity to create regional convenings around the state in 2010, where the folks that came to this Santa Fe experience could serve as representatives in their local communities for helping tell the story, for helping create awareness and understanding, so that over time in this multi-year effort we can create the political will to put additional investments into early childhood education. And finally, public-private partnerships and community engagement strategies, the very best ones include an honest broker, whether it's a person or an entity. And this is someone whose vested interest, their only vested interest, is in reaching a shared understanding and solution, so that all the parties at the table actually have ownership in that solution. And leadership in this space requires an appreciation and understanding of how relationships, whether in the community or workplace, are established and maintained. I'm from Albuquerque, and I've now lived in Santa Fe and have been in northern New Mexico for almost 17 years. And how business gets done in northern New Mexico is very different than Albuquerque. In northern New Mexico, the relationship has to first begin face-to-face. It's what I call whites of the eyes sort of trust development. Before you can even go to phone, before you can even go to email, folks want to meet you, they want to know you, they want to hear your voice, they want to know your nonverbals, they want to know if they can trust you, and they can only tell by look at you in the face. So you can't sort of just jump to the email conversation. And it takes time, it takes patience, and it takes commitment. It's one of the few ways, though, that I find that where you get what I call really wonderful discovery moments, where you get on-the-ground intelligence about what's going on in a community, who's doing what with whom and why, and what makes them tick. What are the pressure spots? What are the pain areas? But you can only do that in person. I've also learned that the trust is built one-on-one, and it is sometimes lent, where an introduction is made for you, whether it's me to a tribal council, or in the case of our efforts to create a telecommunications broadband network in the Chama area. I had an opportunity to go visit with the electric co-op there. And all I wanted to do was, I don't know much about telecommunications, I just knew that they needed to be part of the conversation. But I didn't know anyone on the co-op board. But this is the other thing, you know, I get to learn about northern New Mexico. There are two questions that often get asked of you, and the very first one is, where are you from? And the second question is, who's your family? And I see the heads nod, so you get this. So I get up to the co-op, and I right away know that I need to create some sort of linkage. I need to sort of build instant trust. And so when I got asked the question, where are you from? I didn't say Albuquerque. I said my in-laws are from Cuesta, over the mountain. And then I said, I'm from Albuquerque, my mom's from Las Cruces. We sort of have the whole Rio Grande corridor covered, and they wanted to know what my father-in-law's name was, and does he fish, and does he hunt, and within 3 minutes, I found a cousin in the room on my husband's side. And it made all the difference because sort of the shoulders fell down, and there was no more tension in the room. And so when it became my turn to sort of tell the story about telecommunications and why the co-op needed to be at the table, it was sort of like, it made sense. You know, and it helped. It helped. Effective leadership in this space of public-private or community engagement also means appreciating and understanding what it means to have a diverse community. Diversity is everyone. It's all dimensions of how we identify and connect with each other in both visible and not so visible ways. And all too often we make the big mistake of oversimplifying a particular culture's belief systems. And what I found is that to the extent we can appreciate the diversity in the community and the richness, we become sort of open to new thinking and new ways of doing business. And you get to see the light bulbs go off. And it's just this most amazing feeling for them to tell the story. You know, I still run into people who went through this regional transit experience with me. We haven't done this, it's been 7 years at least, and they still talk about how it felt to go through that process. Over the years, I've learned what is that public-private partnerships cannot be a patchwork quilt of well-meaning intentions and ideas sewn together. They require nurturing, compromises, and reassessment, and maybe most of all, patience. Partnership building is generally not a speedy process, but it can be very effective and very rewarding. It's about helping people find their voice and giving them opportunities to share it. I'd venture to guess that this room is filled by a number of people that are either government employees or employed in the private sector. So public-private partnerships have relevance to you. And if you're retired, you have every opportunity to contribute to these public-private partnerships as well, to community engagement strategies around the state and in your community. I encourage you to be part of this movement by exploring opportunities to serve or lead in business councils, advisory committees, ad hoc consortiums. To the extent they're made available to you, you really just need to jump on the bandwagon. We cannot be innocent bystanders of current events and issues. We need to become civically engaged in creating linkages by building and participating in advocacy partnerships. Political will happens when we break down the fear of sharing territory and what we perceive as limited resources. It's not what we lose by partnering, it's what we gain. Although public-private partnerships have much to offer, it is important to maintain realistic expectations and be aware of challenges to cooperation. But a well-executed and monitored partnership will help business, government, and communities. And frankly, a successful partnership and in any of these spaces strengthens our community fabric. I'd like to leave you with a few words from me, from my own ingredients for a good life. It's how I fill my bucket. Do good things, make a meaningful contribution, learn something new, and have fun. And on that note, I encourage you to become active, involved members of our community. Thank you.